A veteran and his dog won a haunted cabin. What they found inside shattered him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible journey. Grant had never expected to win the haunted cabin, let alone discover what was hidden inside. He and his loyal German shepherd, Scout, had been wandering for months, moving from town to town, with no real place to call home. They had settled in small, temporary spots, but something always seemed to be missing. When the opportunity came to bid on a dilapidated cabin in the remote mountains, he never thought it would be anything more than a place to lay low for a while. But something about the cabin intrigued him, even though the auctioneer mentioned it had a history of strange occurrences. With a quiet determination, Grant placed his bid and won. As they drove through the winding roads toward their new home, the clouds hung low in the sky, and the air grew heavier, as if the mountains themselves were watching them. The landscape was barren, with only the occasional leafless tree swaying in the cold wind. The cabin sat atop a small hill, its silhouette stark against the gray sky. It looked like something from a forgotten time, a relic from the past that the world had abandoned. The paint on the walls was peeling, and the windows were cracked. Despite the outward decay, Grant could feel something in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It wasn't just the isolation of the place or its eerie appearance. There was an energy here, a presence, something that didn't want them to be there. As they entered the cabin, the door creaked loudly, as though protesting their intrusion. Scout, ever the loyal companion, walked in first, his nose twitching, ears alert. Grant followed, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The room was filled with dust and old furniture, but there was something oddly familiar about the place. The floorboards groaned under their weight, and the walls seemed to hum with a strange vibration. They explored the house, finding nothing of value, just old, discarded belongings, remnants of a life long gone. But then, Scout suddenly stopped. His ears stood straight up, his body tensed. He began to growl low, a sound that sent a ripple of unease through Grant. The growl grew louder as Scout moved toward the farthest corner of the room, where an old wooden door stood half-hidden behind a pile of boxes. Grant, heart pounding in his chest, approached cautiously. When he reached for the door handle, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, blowing out the dim candlelight they had brought with them. The door creaked open on its own. A dark hallway stretched out before them, leading into a part of the house that Grant hadn't noticed before. It was as if the cabin had been hiding something from them. With Scout at his side, Grant stepped into the darkness. The floor beneath him was uneven, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and age. As they moved deeper into the hallway, the temperature dropped even further, and the faintest sound of whispering seemed to float through the walls. He could feel the weight of something unseen pressing down on him, as though the very house was holding its breath. What lay ahead was something Grant could never have prepared for. I never expected this place to feel like it had a heartbeat of its own. Grant could feel it, the pressure in the air, the way the walls seemed to close in around him as he stepped deeper into the dark hallway. His boots creaked loudly on the uneven floor, and Scout, the loyal German shepherd, walked ahead, his nose to the ground and his eyes scanning every corner of the dark, neglected space. They had discovered something more than just a cabin. They had uncovered a place that seemed to hold its own secrets, things that were waiting for someone to unlock them. As Grant moved forward, his mind raced with questions. What had happened here? Who had lived in this forsaken place? And why did it feel like it had been abandoned for far longer than anyone would have guessed? The hallway was narrow, the air thick with the smell of dust and old wood. The walls, once solid and proud, now seemed weak, leaning into each other as if trying to hide something. There was no sound except for the occasional creak of the house and the steady breath of wind that had started up again outside. Scout suddenly stopped in his tracks, his fur standing up on end, his ears alert. Grant instinctively reached for the flashlight, his fingers trembling slightly as he turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on an old wooden door at the far end of the hall. This door had been hidden behind a pile of old boxes, as if someone had deliberately tried to keep it out of sight. But now, the door seemed to be calling to them, beckoning them forward. The handle was cold in Grant's hand as he reached for it, a chill running through his body as he turned it. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a room that had clearly been untouched for years. The floor was covered in dust, and old furniture was strewn about haphazardly. But it was the walls that caught his attention. Scrawled across them in faded black ink were strange symbols, patterns that seemed to shift and change when he looked at them too long. Grant's heart pounded in his chest, his breath shallow as he stepped into the room, followed closely by Scout. The room seemed to grow colder with each step they took. The temperature had already dropped dramatically since they entered the cabin, but this room felt as though it had been frozen in time. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of something old and forgotten. Scout's growling grew louder as he moved toward the far corner of the room, his eyes locked on something hidden in the shadows. Grant followed, his feet barely making a sound on the floor. He couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone in this room, even though the place looked empty. In the far corner, covered in layers of dust, stood an old wooden chest. It was heavy and ancient-looking, the kind of chest you would expect to find in a pirate's treasure hoard, not in a forgotten cabin in the middle of nowhere. Grant knelt down, his fingers brushing the surface of the chest, and he felt a faint vibration beneath his touch. It was as if the chest was alive, pulsing with a rhythm that didn't belong in the stillness of the room. He hesitated for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he opened the chest. Inside, wrapped in layers of old cloth, was a stack of yellowed papers, a few photographs, and an old, rusted key. The key glinted in the flashlight's beam, and Grant felt a sudden rush of unease. The photographs were of a family, an older man, a woman, and a young child. They were smiling in the pictures, but there was something about their eyes that seemed off, as if they were hiding a terrible secret. As Grant rifled through the papers, he found a letter, its edges worn and torn from years of neglect. He opened it carefully, reading the faint, shaky handwriting that filled the page. "The house is alive, and it won't let us leave. If you find this, do not come looking for us. It's too late." The letter ended abruptly, the ink smudged as if the writer had been in a hurry to finish. Grant's heart skipped a beat as he looked up from the letter. The air in the room had grown thick, and he could feel the walls closing in on him. It wasn't just the cold. It was something else, something darker. Scout's growl grew louder, and suddenly, the room seemed to shake. The walls rattled, the floor creaked, and the sound of something heavy moving from the other side of the room echoed through the silence. Grant stood up quickly, his mind racing. What had he uncovered? And why did it feel like something was about to awaken? Scout's growling reached a fever pitch as he lunged toward the door, trying to pull Grant away. But it was too late. The door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside the room. The pounding in Grant's chest grew louder, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had no idea what he had just unleashed, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary cabin. It was alive, and it had a story to tell. A story that Grant was about to learn the hard way. I knew something was terribly wrong the moment the door slammed shut behind us. The sound echoed through the room, a deep, resounding thud that seemed to vibrate through my bones. I reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked, sealed tight, and no matter how hard I pulled, it didn't move. Scout stood by my side, growling low, his hackles raised, his eyes darting to every shadow in the room. He could feel it too. The presence, the danger, whatever had been waiting here for so long. The air around us seemed to grow heavier, colder, the temperature dropping with each passing second. I could see my breath now, forming clouds in the dim light of the flashlight. The only sound was the faint hum of the old house settling, as if it were alive and breathing with us. I took a step back, feeling my pulse race, my heart thudding in my chest. What was this place? What was it hiding? The strange symbols on the walls seemed to move in the shadows, shifting when I wasn't looking directly at them. It was as if the cabin was watching us, waiting for us to figure out the mystery it had been keeping for so long. I turned to Scout, my loyal companion, who had become eerily still, his amber eyes locked on something just beyond the edge of the light. He took a cautious step forward, his body tense, his tail low. Then he froze, his gaze fixed on something in the corner of the room. I followed his stare, and my breath caught in my throat. The farthest corner of the room was shrouded in darkness, but there, just at the edge of the light, I saw it. A figure. A shadow. It was tall, thin, and almost human, but not quite. Its form was distorted, as if it were made of smoke or mist, moving in and out of focus. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. I wasn't a stranger to fear. I'd seen things in my time as a soldier that would haunt anyone for a lifetime. But this felt different. This was something else, something far beyond my experience. The figure didn't move at first. It just stood there, watching us. Then, slowly, it began to shift, to grow larger, more solid. It stepped forward, and the temperature in the room dropped even further. I could see my breath in front of me now, a cloud of frozen air hanging in the space between us. "Scout," I whispered, my voice shaky. "Stay close, boy." But Scout was already ahead of me, moving toward the figure, his growl growing louder, more urgent. I grabbed the flashlight, shining it directly at the figure, hoping that the light would do something, anything to push it back. But it didn't. The beam of light seemed to pass right through it, as if the figure weren't even real. And then, in a voice that sounded like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, it spoke. "You shouldn't be here." The words sent a chill through my spine, like ice running through my veins. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the thing in front of me. As it continued to grow, its shape becoming clearer, more distinct. It was a man, or something that had once been a man. His face was pale, almost ghostly, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through me. His lips were thin, drawn tight into a grimace, and his clothes, if you could call them that, were tattered, barely hanging onto his frame. He reached out a hand, and as he did, the room seemed to grow even colder. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, and I could hear the soft whispers of voices in the air. It was like the house itself was speaking, warning me, telling me to leave. But it was too late. The figure took another step toward me, and in that moment, I felt the weight of something heavy, something ancient, pressing down on me. My legs felt like lead, my arms stiff at my sides. I couldn't move, couldn't escape. The figure was almost upon me now, his hand outstretched, and I knew, deep down, that if he touched me, it would be the end. But just as his fingers were about to brush against my arm, Scout lunged forward, teeth bared, snapping at the figure. The creature hissed, its form flickering for a moment as if it were losing its grip on reality. Scout's growl turned into a vicious bark as he lunged again, but the figure recoiled, its form distorting, becoming less solid. With a sharp, inhuman cry, the figure vanished, dissipating into the air like smoke, leaving only a cold emptiness behind. I stood there, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my heart still pounding in my chest. Scout was by my side now, looking up at me, with wide, worried eyes. He didn't growl anymore. He was silent, watching the room with the same unease that I felt. "What the hell was that?" I muttered, my voice hoarse. But there was no answer. The house was silent once more, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had changed. Something had awakened, and now, there was no going back. I had to know what this place was hiding. I had to find out what had been lurking in the shadows all these years. And I would, even if it meant facing whatever else this house had to throw at me. I could feel the chill of the air creeping deeper into my bones. But the sudden silence after the apparition's disappearance was even worse. It was as if the house itself had stopped breathing, and in that stillness, the walls seemed to press in tighter. I had no idea what I had just witnessed, but I knew one thing for certain. The nightmare wasn't over. I stood frozen for a few moments, my heart still pounding in my chest, but my feet remained stuck to the floor. I was trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mind raced, trying to latch onto anything logical, but nothing came. Scout stayed close by my side, his ears still pricked, his body tense, and his eyes darted around the room. He was clearly unsettled. It wasn't just the atmosphere of the house anymore. Something far worse had happened. I needed answers. I turned back toward the door. It was still locked. The handle wouldn't turn, no matter how hard I tried. I didn't know if it was the house's doing, or if the room itself had somehow become alive. My pulse quickened again as I moved toward the center of the room, my footsteps slow and deliberate, my flashlight shining over the walls once more. The symbols, those eerie markings that had seemed to shift in the dark, were still there, etched into the wood. But now, they looked different. The more I stared at them, the more I felt like they were moving, pulsing almost, like they were beckoning me to understand something I wasn't ready for. I looked at Scout. "Stay close, boy," I whispered, not sure if I was talking to him or myself. I stepped forward cautiously, my hand brushing over one of the symbols. As I did, the room seemed to groan, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and for a split second, I thought I felt a subtle vibration, like the house was responding to my touch. I jerked my hand away, heart racing. "What is this place?" I muttered to myself. The sudden sound of something scraping against the floor made me jump, my flashlight flickering as I spun around, searching the room. But it was just Scout. He was sniffing at the floorboards near the back corner. His ears were up, his tail stiff, and he was fixated on something beneath the floor. I moved toward him, kneeling down to get a better look. There was something different about this part of the floor, some kind of groove. I could see the edges of a trapdoor hidden beneath the worn wood, just slightly raised, as if it had been disturbed recently. "This wasn't here before," I muttered, reaching down to try and lift it. The trapdoor was heavy, its edges covered in grime, but as I pried it up with all my strength, I felt the weight shift, and it finally gave way with a loud, groaning noise. Cold air rushed out from the opening, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. Something deep below us was breathing, something ancient. The beam of my flashlight fell into the darkness, revealing only a narrow, steep staircase leading down into the blackness. The scent that wafted up from the depths was like damp earth, mixed with something metallic, almost like blood. Scout whimpered softly, but he didn't back away. He was standing right beside me, staring down into the hole, his body rigid with tension. It was clear he wanted to go down there, as if he sensed something I couldn't. "I don't know, Scout," I said quietly, still unsure. But my curiosity got the better of me, and despite every instinct telling me to leave, I stepped forward, my legs heavy as I descended the stairs. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell of something long forgotten filled my lungs. My flashlight illuminated the walls, revealing more symbols, etched into the stone, ancient and worn, like they had been carved by hands long gone. The further I descended, the darker it became, until my flashlight flickered and barely illuminated anything beyond a few feet. I felt a chill spread through my body, but I couldn't stop now. I had to know what was hidden down here, what the house had been keeping from me all these years. The stairs creaked beneath my weight as I reached the bottom, and the beam of light revealed a small, empty room. It was bare, except for a single stone pedestal in the center, its surface cracked and worn. My eyes went straight to it, my heart skipping a beat. Resting on the pedestal was an old book, its leather cover frayed and torn with age. Something about it seemed wrong. I slowly approached the pedestal, my hands shaking slightly as I reached out to touch it. As my fingers brushed against the surface of the book, the temperature in the room dropped even further, and the air seemed to grow thicker, as though the very atmosphere was pressing against me. My flashlight flickered again, and this time, it went out completely. Darkness surrounded me, and in the pitch black, I could hear something moving, something shifting deep within the room. It wasn't just the walls. Something in the corner of the room was alive. I could feel it. I wasn't alone anymore. And then, I heard the whispering. It was faint at first, like the rustling of old pages, but then it grew louder, more distinct. Words in a language I couldn't understand. And at that moment, I knew what I had uncovered. It wasn't just a cabin. It was a prison. A place where something ancient and terrifying had been locked away, waiting for someone to come and release it. I had walked straight into its trap. I could feel the presence in the room, like 1,000 eyes watching my every move. I stood frozen in the darkness, my breath shallow, trying to make sense of the whispering that filled the air. It wasn't just the wind or the creaking of the old house. It was something deeper, something ancient, filling the space with its voice. I couldn't see anything in the pitch black, but I could feel it. Something was moving. Something was coming closer. Scout stood by my side, his body tense, his fur bristling as he growled low. His ears were pointed forward, and his eyes were locked onto the darkness, as if he could see something I couldn't. I reached down to reassure him, but my hand shook as I touched his fur. The book on the pedestal was still there, its leather cover old and cracked, but something about it seemed to pulse with energy. It was calling to me, pulling me closer, urging me to open it. Against every instinct, I took a step forward, my flashlight still dead in my hand. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. I could hear the words now, but they didn't make sense. Nothing about this place made sense. I reached for the book, my fingers trembling as I gripped the edges of its cover. It was cold, colder than anything I had ever felt, like ice wrapped in skin. As I opened it, the room seemed to shake. The air turned thick, and the whispers turned into a deafening roar, overwhelming my senses. The pages were yellowed with age, and the ink was smudged in places, as if it had been written hastily, under duress. The first words I saw were in a language I didn't recognize, but I could feel their weight, their power. The more I read, the more the room seemed to distort, the walls warping as if they were alive. And then, it happened. The floor beneath me gave way with a sudden crack, and I tumbled forward, landing hard on my stomach. The book slipped from my hands, and I reached out to grab it, but it vanished into the floor as if it had never been there. I looked up, and in the dim light, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure was back, standing in the corner of the room, its shadow long and twisted, stretching across the walls. It was not just the ghostly form I had seen earlier. It was something worse, something far more sinister. Its eyes were black, voids of emptiness, and it was smiling at me. A cruel, knowing smile. The air around it shimmered with an unnatural energy, and I could feel the temperature drop even further. It was getting closer, and I couldn't move. My legs were paralyzed with fear. The figure reached out, its hand trembling with ancient power. I knew it wasn't just a ghost. It was something far more dangerous, something that had been trapped here for centuries. And I had just released it. I backed away slowly, but the floor was unstable. The walls seemed to close in, and the ground beneath me cracked with every movement I made. I could hear Scout barking in the distance, but his voice seemed so far away. I had no choice but to face the figure. I had to end this. The creature's grin widened as it stepped forward, its feet dragging across the floor like a puppet on strings. It opened its mouth, and the voice that came from it was not human. It was a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. "You shouldn't have come," it hissed, the sound reverberating in my chest. "Now you will never leave." I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew it had been waiting for someone to release it. And that someone had been me. I reached into my jacket pocket, my fingers brushing against the small knife I always carried with me. It wasn't much, but it was the only thing I had. I gripped it tightly and stood my ground. I wasn't going to let this thing win. I wasn't going to let it take me, or Scout, or anyone else who had the misfortune of stepping into this hell. The creature took another step, and the ground beneath me groaned in protest. I could hear its laughter, deep and echoing, like it was coming from the depths of the earth itself. But I didn't wait. I lunged forward, thrusting the knife into the air, aiming for the creature's heart. It was a desperate move, a move born from fear, but it was all I had left. But just before I could make contact, the creature's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with an unnatural force. The pain was immediate, sharp, and I felt my bones begin to crack under its grip. The creature leaned in close, its breath cold against my ear. "You are weak," it whispered. "You can't fight what has been here longer than you could ever imagine." The pressure on my wrist intensified, and I could feel myself slipping. I had no strength left. I had failed. But then, just as I thought all hope was lost, I heard Scout's barking again, louder this time. The sound was closer, urgent, as if it was calling me to do something I hadn't thought of. I looked at the creature, my eyes blazing, with a sudden determination. "Not today," I whispered. The creature's grip loosened for just a moment, and that was all I needed. I pulled my arm back, yanking the knife free from its hand and stabbing it straight into the creature's chest. It screamed, a high-pitched wail that rattled the very bones of the house. And then, just like that, it collapsed into a pile of ash, its form dissolving into nothingness. The room was silent once more. The whispers were gone. The temperature slowly returned to normal, and the air felt lighter. But as I stood there, breathing heavily, I knew it wasn't over. There was more to this place, more to the mystery of the haunted cabin that had yet to be uncovered. And I was going to find it, no matter what it took. I stood there in the aftermath, panting, every muscle in my body sore from the fight I'd just survived. The cabin was eerily quiet now, almost too quiet. The whispers that had once filled the air were gone, as if the house itself had taken a breath and exhaled. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't done yet. I knew, deep down, that the battle with the entity that had haunted this place wasn't over, even though the creature had disintegrated into ash before my eyes. There had to be more, some hidden part of this place that I hadn't uncovered yet. Something kept pulling me forward, urging me to find the rest of the story, to discover what this house had been hiding for all these years. Scout was standing by my side, still alert, his ears pricked as he scanned the room for any signs of movement. His eyes were sharp, and his growl was low, warning me that the danger might not have passed entirely. I glanced around the room. The floor beneath me was cracked and uneven, and the walls still bore the strange, shifting symbols that had plagued me since I first stepped inside. But now, I could see something new, a faint light coming from the corner of the room where the pedestal had once stood. It wasn't bright, just a dim glow, but it was enough to catch my attention. I moved toward it cautiously, keeping a close eye on Scout as we approached. The light seemed to flicker, like a candle struggling to stay lit, but there was something about it that felt alive. I knelt down, my hand reaching for the source of the glow. As my fingers brushed against the floor, the light intensified, and I felt a jolt of energy surge through me. It was as if the house itself was reacting to my touch, responding to something deep within it. The floorboard beneath my hand creaked and shifted, revealing a small, hidden compartment. I couldn't believe it. It was another trapdoor, smaller this time, but just as ancient. With a deep breath, I pried it open, and once again, cold air rushed up from the dark space below. I hesitated for a moment. The last time I opened a hidden door, it led me to something far darker than I could have imagined. But this time, there was no turning back. I had to know. I had to see it for myself. With Scout close by, I descended into the dark, the faint light from the house above fading as I moved deeper into the earth. The stairs were narrow, the wood creaking under my weight, but they held firm. The air grew colder with each step, and the walls seemed to close in on me, pressing me down into the darkness. My flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the stone walls. The deeper I went, the heavier the air felt, like I was descending into something far older than the cabin itself. When I reached the bottom, I saw something I hadn't expected, another room, but this one was different. It wasn't like the rooms above. It was a cave, carved into the stone, with walls that looked like they had been chiseled by hand, as if someone had spent years carving out this space in the earth. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and old earth. It was quiet, too quiet. The room was empty, except for a single stone altar at the far end, covered in dust and cobwebs. But it wasn't the altar that caught my attention. It was the markings on the walls, similar to the ones in the cabin, but now they were clearer, sharper, and more intricate. The symbols were etched into the stone like ancient runes, and I could feel their power, even without fully understanding them. There was something deep within this place, something dark, something powerful. As I moved closer to the altar, I saw something else, something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Lying on the stone surface was a weathered journal, its pages yellowed with age. The book was open, and as I stepped forward to examine it, a cold chill ran down my spine. The writing in the journal was in the same strange language I had seen in the cabin, but this time, there were sketches too, drawings of the very cabin I had entered, and beneath them, drawings of the creature I had fought. The journal was filled with notes, some written in a hurried scrawl, others carefully crafted, but all of them spoke of the same thing. The house was not just haunted. It was a gateway, a portal, a place where something ancient had been trapped for centuries, and now, with the rituals that had been performed over the years, it had begun to awaken. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach as I read the final entry. The ritual is complete. The house will open the door. The Dark One will return. The last line was smeared, as if the writer had been in a hurry, but the message was clear. The house wasn't just a home for spirits. It was a place where something had been sealed away, and now it was free. A heavy silence settled over me as the weight of what I had discovered sank in. This wasn't just a haunted cabin. It was a prison, and the thing I had fought wasn't the only thing inside. There was something far worse, something that had been locked away for centuries, and I had just set it loose. The ground beneath me trembled, and the walls seemed to groan with a deep, rumbling sound. I could feel the energy in the room shifting, growing stronger. The house was alive, and it wasn't finished with me yet. I felt the ground tremble beneath me again, this time harder, as if the house was reacting to my discovery. The energy in the room was electric, charged with a dark presence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my own racing heartbeat. It wasn't just the ancient entity I had unleashed, it was the house itself. I could feel its oppressive weight, the decades of pent-up energy begging to be freed. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, and I could feel a heaviness pressing down on my chest. It was as if the walls were closing in, squeezing the life out of everything in their path. My flashlight flickered one last time before it died completely, plunging me into total darkness. The only sound now was the deep, guttural rumble coming from somewhere deep within the earth beneath me. Scout's growling was low and urgent, and I reached out to reassure him, but his body was rigid, his fur standing on end. Whatever was coming, whatever was awakening, it wasn't something we could fight with our usual tactics. It was something older, something stronger. My hands were shaking, and I could feel the cold sweat gathering on my brow. I had to get out. I had to find a way to stop this. I turned, my eyes desperately trying to adjust to the darkness, searching for the stairs. But then, I saw something. A figure standing in the doorway, just out of reach of the light that I had left behind. It was tall, too tall, and its outline was barely visible against the blackness. But I could feel its presence pressing against me like a physical force. The figure didn't move, but I could sense its eyes on me, burning through the darkness. My breath hitched as I backed away, but it was too late. The figure stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. I reached for the knife in my pocket, my fingers closing around the hilt, but my legs felt like lead, and the cold was now seeping into my bones. There was no escape. The figure stepped closer, and the air grew colder still. I could feel the temperature drop another 10 degrees, my breath coming out in frosty clouds. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. Scout let out a fierce bark, the sound echoing off the stone walls, but it only made the figure move faster. It was getting closer. "Stay back," I whispered, though I knew it was useless. The figure had already made its way into the room, its presence filling the space like a cloud of darkness. And then, in an instant, I felt a searing pain shoot through my chest. I gasped, stumbling back, my hand clutching at the spot where the pain had pierced me. I looked down and that's when I saw it. The figure wasn't human. It was something else, something that shouldn't have existed. It was as if the shadows themselves had taken form and were consuming me from the inside out. The pain intensified, and I fell to my knees, my vision blurring as I struggled to breathe. I tried to fight it, tried to push it away, but I couldn't. It was too strong, too powerful. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, a bright flash of light filled the room. The figure recoiled, a scream of rage echoing through the space. I turned, squinting into the light, and for a moment, I thought I saw something, someone, standing in the doorway. A figure dressed in white, their features obscured by the light surrounding them. But before I could focus, the light flickered and vanished, leaving only darkness behind. I blinked, struggling to stay conscious as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had it been a hallucination? Or had someone truly come to save me? I didn't know. I couldn't afford to waste time thinking about it. The pain in my chest was still there, gnawing at me, and I knew I had to find a way out. But I was trapped. The house had taken me, and I didn't know if there was any way to escape. I stood shakily, my legs threatening to give way beneath me, and I turned toward the stairs. My only hope was to find a way to stop whatever was happening before it was too late. As I started to ascend the stairs, the house seemed to groan in protest. The walls trembled, and the very floor beneath me seemed to shift, as if the house was alive, trying to hold me captive. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every instinct told me to keep moving, to find a way to break the cycle, to stop the evil that was slowly consuming everything in its path. As I reached the top of the stairs, I turned and glanced back. The doorway to the hidden room was now closed, the altar and the journal nowhere to be seen. But I could still feel the darkness in the air, thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. I had to keep moving, and I had to find the source of whatever had been unleashed. I could hear Scout's breathing behind me, his tail thumping softly against the floor. He was with me, and as long as I had him by my side, I knew I couldn't give up. Not yet. There was still time to stop this. There had to be. I moved quickly, my heart racing as I climbed the stairs, Scout close behind me. The air was still thick, the oppressive weight of the house's presence pressing down on us with every step. The house seemed to groan with every movement, as if it were alive and fighting to keep us from escaping. The darkness seemed to stretch on forever, but I knew I couldn't stop. I couldn't look back. I had to find a way out. I reached the top of the stairs, and the familiar hallway stretched before me. The walls, once menacing, now felt like they were closing in, almost suffocating me. There was no way forward, no clear path out. Everything felt like a dead end. But somewhere, deep inside, I knew the answers were waiting for me. They had to be. I felt the coldness in the air shift. It was no longer just the chill of an old house, but the kind of cold that came with something unnatural, something far darker. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, a kind of tension that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Scout stopped in his tracks, his ears perked, his body tense. I crouched down next to him, my hand resting on his fur. He growled softly, his gaze fixed on the far end of the hallway. My flashlight flickered again, casting shadows that seemed to dance and move on their own. The light was barely enough to pierce the darkness, but it was all I had. I looked toward the end of the hall, where an old door stood slightly ajar. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, but the faintest glow, almost imperceptible, seeped through the crack in the door. Something inside was calling to me, and I knew I had to open it. I stood slowly, my breath shallow as I made my way toward the door. The moment my hand touched the cold doorknob, I felt a sudden shift in the air. The house seemed to inhale, a long, drawn-out breath that made the walls tremble. I hesitated, but only for a moment. Then, with one swift motion, I turned the knob and stepped into the room. The glow intensified as I entered, and I could finally see it, the source of the strange light. In the center of the room was another pedestal, this one larger and more elaborate than the one I had seen earlier. Resting on top of it was a stone urn, covered in layers of dust. The light was coming from within, a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to emanate from the urn itself. As I approached, I felt the temperature drop even further. The air was thick, heavy with something ancient and powerful. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in my ears, as I reached out and gently touched the urn. The glow from within seemed to respond, brightening and shifting as if it were alive. The moment my fingers made contact, a flash of light filled the room, blinding me for an instant. When the light faded, I found myself standing in a different place. I wasn't in the cabin anymore. I was outside, standing in the middle of a dense, fog-filled forest. The trees were tall and twisted, their gnarled branches reaching out like hands trying to grab me. The ground beneath my feet was soft and uneven, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. I looked around, disoriented, my heart pounding in my chest. Where was I? How had I gotten here? The last thing I remembered was touching the urn, and now I was somewhere else. Scout was by my side, his body tense, his eyes scanning the fog. It was as if he could sense something I couldn't. He growled low, a warning. I stood still for a moment, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I had no idea what was happening or how I had been transported to this strange, eerie place. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. Something in the fog was moving, and it was coming closer. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate. The ground beneath me shifted, and the fog seemed to part, revealing a figure standing in the distance. At first, I couldn't make out who or what it was, but as it moved closer, I could see it clearly. A tall, cloaked figure, its face hidden beneath a hood. The figure's presence seemed to fill the space, its energy almost tangible, like a storm waiting to break. Scout's growl grew louder, more urgent. He stepped in front of me, as if to protect me from whatever was coming. The figure stopped about 20 feet away, its head tilted slightly, as if studying me. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see its face. It didn't speak, but there was something about it, something in the air, that told me it knew who I was. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice rough, but steady. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it took a slow step forward, its cloak swirling around it like mist. I instinctively stepped back, my hand resting on the hilt of the knife in my pocket. But the figure didn't advance further. Instead, it lifted one hand, pointing towards something in the distance, beyond the trees. I followed its gesture, my eyes narrowing. In the distance, through the fog, I saw it. A house. It was old, its windows dark and empty, and it stood alone in the clearing. The figure's voice, when it came, was like the wind, soft but chilling. The house calls you. Go. I didn't know what it meant, but I had no choice. Something inside me urged me forward, pulling me toward the house. I had to know what lay ahead, what secrets it held. I turned to Scout. Stay close, boy, I whispered. We started toward the house, the fog swirling around us as we moved forward. But I knew, whatever was inside, it wasn't just a house. It was the key to everything, and I had no choice but to unlock its door. I walked through the dense fog, the ground soft beneath my boots, my breath visible in the chilling air. Scout moved ahead, his nose twitching, his body low to the ground, always alert. The fog seemed to thicken with every step, swirling around us like it was alive, wrapping us in its cold embrace. As we drew closer to the house, I could see it more clearly, a dilapidated structure, its windows dark and empty, the roof sagging, and the door hanging loosely on its hinges. The house felt abandoned, forgotten by time, yet something about it called to me, as if it had been waiting for my arrival. My pulse quickened as I approached, each step heavier. Then the last. Scout's growl was low, a warning that we were not alone. I reached out, pushing the door open slowly. The hinges squealed in protest, the sound echoing through the thick fog. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and decay. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight as I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing only the remnants of a once lived-in space. Furniture left to rot, dust covering every surface. But something was different. There was an energy here, a weight to the air that was impossible to ignore. The temperature dropped again, and I could see my breath mist in the flashlight's beam. Scout stopped just inside the door, his body tense, his ears alert. He wasn't growling now, but he was listening, sensing something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I moved deeper into the house, my flashlight bouncing off the walls, casting strange shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking. The house was alive, and it had been waiting for me. The floor led me toward what looked like a hallway, and at the end of it, I saw it. A door, old and weathered, with intricate carvings along the edges. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. Without thinking, I moved toward it. My hand reached for the doorknob, and as soon as my fingers brushed against it, I felt the air around me shift. The whispering began again, faint at first, but growing louder with every step I took. It was coming from beyond the door, and I knew, deep down, I had to open it. With a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room beyond was unlike anything I had seen in the house so far. It was circular, with stone walls that felt cold to the touch, and in the center of the room stood an altar. The altar was old, covered in dust, but it looked different from anything else in the house. There was a strange symbol etched into the surface, glowing faintly, as though it had been waiting to be touched. The whispering grew louder, more frantic, and I stepped closer to the altar. Scout stayed by my side, his eyes locked onto the altar, and I could see the unease in his posture. I knew something was about to happen. The moment my fingers brushed against the symbol, the ground trembled beneath me, and the room seemed to shift. The air thickened, and I could feel something pressing against my chest, as though the house itself was alive, breathing, reacting to my touch. The symbol on the altar pulsed with a strange energy, and suddenly, a crack appeared in the stone floor beneath my feet. The crack widened, splitting the room in two, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. A cold wind rushed up from the opening, carrying with it a foul odor, a stench that made my stomach churn. I could see nothing but darkness below, an endless void that seemed to call to me, beckoning me to step closer. But I knew better. The house had already taken so much from me. I wasn't going to fall into whatever trap it had set. Scout barked once, sharply, and I looked at him, nodding. We had to leave. The ground trembled again, and the whispers grew louder, almost deafening now. Something was rising, something from the depths of the house, something I had just unleashed. I backed away from the altar, pulling Scout with me. The room continued to shake, the air thick with tension. As I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the walls. I spun around, my hand reaching for the doorknob, but it was stuck. I was trapped. Panic surged in my chest, but I couldn't let it control me. I had to stay calm. I looked around the room, trying to find another way out. The stone walls seemed to close in, the whispers louder now, clearer. "You cannot leave," a voice echoed in the darkness. I froze. It was a voice, but not like any I had ever heard before. It was low, guttural, and full of malice. I turned toward the voice, my pulse hammering in my chest. From the shadows, something began to emerge, a figure, tall and shrouded in darkness. The figure stepped into the faint light, and I could see it clearly now. It was the same figure I had seen before, the one in the fog. But this time it was real. It was here, in front of me. The figure's face was hidden beneath a hood, its hands outstretched, reaching toward me. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The house wasn't just haunted. It was a prison, and the entity inside had been waiting for someone to open the door. I stood frozen in the center of the room, heart hammering in my chest, as the figure stepped closer. Its face was still hidden beneath the hood, but I could feel its presence like a suffocating weight, pressing down on me from every direction. I didn't know how much longer I could stand still, but somehow I couldn't move. The air was thick with a cold that seeped into my bones, and every instinct screamed at me to run. But I couldn't. I wasn't sure where to run. The door had slammed shut, trapping me in this room with the thing that had been waiting for me. The whispers were louder now, swirling around me like 1,000 voices, all speaking at once, their words indecipherable, but their tone unmistakably full of malice. Scout, standing at my side, growled softly, his fur bristling with tension. I could feel him, too, growing more uneasy by the second. He didn't trust this thing, and neither did I. The figure paused just a few feet in front of me, its outstretched hands hovering as if waiting for something. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. "You shouldn't have come," the figure said, its voice low and cold, like the whisper of wind through a graveyard. The sound sent a chill down my spine. The figure took a step forward, and the room seemed to shrink. The walls closed in around me, and the temperature dropped further until the very air felt frozen. I backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were too close, the door locked. I had nowhere left to run. My fingers tightened around the knife in my pocket, the only weapon I had left, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. Nothing would be enough against this thing. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying me. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, its hands reaching for me with incredible speed. Instinctively, I brought up the knife, swinging it in front of me, but it passed through the figure's hands as if they were nothing more than mist. A cold rush of air hit me as the figure's hands brushed against my face, its touch like ice, sending a wave of paralysis through my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was as if the very life was being sucked from me, drained by the thing in front of me. The figure spoke again, its voice now closer, echoing in my ears. "You are too late. The house is awake. And now, so am I." The word struck me like a blow to the chest. The house. What did it mean? What had I unleashed? I tried to scream, to fight back, but no sound came. It was as if my voice had been stolen, leaving me helpless, alone in the darkness with whatever this thing was. I felt my knees give way, my body collapsing to the floor. The coldness spread through me, numbing my limbs, until all I could feel was the weight of the figure standing over me. But then, just as suddenly as it had come, the pressure lifted. The figure stepped back, its form flickering like a candle flame in the wind. I gasped for air, my lungs burning as if I had been holding my breath for an eternity. My hands trembled as I tried to push myself back to my feet. The figure was still there, but it wasn't advancing. It was waiting, watching. I felt a surge of anger, a flare of desperation. I wasn't going to let this thing win. I wasn't going to be its prisoner. With a scream of defiance, I lunged forward, gripping the knife with all my strength. The figure reacted instantly, its form shifting and warping, as if it were made of smoke. My blade passed through it again, but this time, the figure howled, a sound so chilling that it seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. The floor beneath me cracked, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as the walls around me seemed to close in, threatening to swallow me whole. But I refused to give up. I had come this far. I had fought my way through too much to be stopped now. The figure, still flickering, loomed in front of me once more, but something was different. It seemed less solid, weaker, as if my attack had done something, had hurt it. I didn't know how, but I wasn't going to question it. I gripped the knife tighter, my focus narrowing. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for Scout, for everything I had left. The figure reached out again, its hands now clawed, its fingers stretching toward me. I took a deep breath and, with everything I had, I drove the knife into the figure's chest, right where its heart should have been. The figure screamed, its form twisting violently, and then, with a final, deafening roar, it shattered into 1,000 pieces, like glass breaking. The room went silent. The pressure in the air lifted, and the temperature slowly began to rise again. I stood there, panting, my body trembling with exhaustion, the knife still in my hand. Scout moved to my side, nuzzling my leg, his body warm against mine. For a moment, we just stood there, alone in the silence, surrounded by the remnants of the darkness that had tried to consume us. But I knew the fight wasn't over. The house was still alive, and there was still something else I needed to uncover. I couldn't stop now. Not after everything I had been through. I had to finish this. I had to find a way to destroy whatever evil still lingered here. The cabin had been waiting for me, and now, I was going to make sure it never trapped anyone else again. I stood there, breathing heavily, the echo of the battle still reverberating in my chest. The figure had vanished, but the house was far from silent. A low hum filled the air, like the buzz of electricity, growing stronger with each passing second. It wasn't over. It couldn't be. The walls around me seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, a heartbeat that belonged to something much older than any house I had ever seen. I could still feel its presence, lingering in the shadows, watching me. Scout stayed close, his body tense, eyes scanning every corner of the room, every crevice in the walls. I knew he could feel it too. We had come so far, fought so much, but there was still something left. I turned away from the shattered remnants of the dark figure and looked toward the center of the room, where the stone pedestal had once stood. It was empty now, but the air around it seemed charged, as if something was waiting to be revealed. I stepped forward, my feet heavy on the floor as I approached the place where the figure had been destroyed. Something wasn't right. The ground beneath me felt different, almost like it was breathing. A faint glow flickered beneath the cracks in the floor, as though something was trying to escape. I knelt down, my fingers brushing the cold stone, and the moment I touched it, the light flared up, bright and blinding, forcing me to look away. A deep rumble shook the room, and the walls groaned in protest. I felt the very foundation of the cabin shift beneath me. It was happening again. The house was alive, and it was waking up. The hum grew louder, more intense, as if it were feeding off the energy of the destruction I had caused. I looked around, searching for any way to stop it, but the house seemed to be changing. The walls stretched and twisted, bending in unnatural ways. The once still air became charged with an electric tension, and the temperature dropped again, the chill creeping through my bones. Scout's growl intensified, his fur standing on end, and I knew we had reached the tipping point. Whatever was happening, whatever evil the house had been hiding, was about to be unleashed. I backed away from the pedestal, my eyes darting around the room, but there was no escape. The door was gone, replaced by a solid wall of stone, the hallway leading out now just a dark void. I was trapped, and then I saw it, a crack forming in the floor, growing larger, as if something was pushing its way through from beneath. My breath caught in my throat. It was like the house was trying to give birth to something that had been held captive for far too long. The floor trembled beneath me, and the air crackled with an unnatural energy. I reached for my knife, my hand shaking as I gripped the hilt, but I knew it wasn't going to be enough. This wasn't just some ghost or demon I could fight off. This was something ancient, something powerful. The crack in the floor widened, and from it, a dark mist began to pour out, swirling around my feet, rising higher and higher, until it enveloped the room. I could feel the presence, feel the weight of it pushing down on me, like a living entity, suffocating me with its darkness. Scout barked fiercely, his teeth bared, but I could tell even he was afraid. I stepped back, my heart racing as the mist continued to pour from the crack. And then, from the center of it, a figure emerged. This one was different. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before. It was tall, its form twisted and grotesque, like it had been cobbled together from the darkness itself. Its eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and its mouth opened wide, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. The creature's voice was like a growl, but there was something else there, something older and deeper. "You have set me free," it hissed, its voice filling the room, vibrating in my chest. "And now, you will pay the price." The mist swirled faster, faster until it was like a storm, a black whirlwind of darkness that threatened to swallow everything. I tried to move, tried to fight, but my body was frozen, my legs heavy, my breath coming in short gasps. I could feel it, feel the darkness seeping into me, trying to take control. I reached for my knife, the last weapon I had left, and I forced myself to stand tall. But the creature was already too close. It reached out with its twisted arms, grabbing hold of my shoulders, pulling me toward it. I could feel its cold, its power draining from me. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible, but the creature just laughed. "There is no escape," it said, its grip tightening. "You belong to me now." The darkness around me intensified, and I felt my vision blur. But then, just as I thought it was over, I felt a surge of energy, faint, but real. Scout lunged forward, biting into the creature's arm, and the creature screamed, a horrible, high-pitched screech that shook the very walls of the house. The grip on my shoulders loosened, and for a split second, I was free. I didn't hesitate. I swung my knife, driving it deep into the creature's chest. It howled in pain, its form flickering, and then, just like that, it disappeared, leaving nothing but the lingering mist. The room fell silent. The pressure in the air lifted, and the temperature slowly began to rise again. I sank to my knees, gasping for air, my body shaking from the fight. Scout stood beside me, his fur bristling, but his eyes were calm, as if he knew it was over. The house was still alive, still full of dark energy, but the creature was gone. And for the first time since I stepped into this cursed place, I felt a sliver of relief. But I knew the battle wasn't over. The house had been sealed for a reason, and now that I had opened it, I couldn't stop until I had destroyed everything it contained. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me as I sat there, my breath slow but ragged, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The creature was gone, but the house, it was still alive. There was an energy here, a lingering presence that I couldn't quite shake. The air was thick with it, as if the walls themselves were breathing, waiting. Scout stood by my side, his eyes scanning the room, alert as ever, his body tense. I wasn't sure what came next. What had I really destroyed? The creature had vanished, but it had left something behind. The house still seemed to hold its breath, like it was preparing for the next phase of its dark awakening. I stood up, my legs unsteady, but I couldn't sit still. I had come this far, and I couldn't leave without finishing it. My hand instinctively reached for the knife I had used, the cold steel reassuring against my palm. It wasn't much, but it was all I had, and it had worked once before. The room was still, but the faintest sounds, creaks, groans, echoed through the walls. The darkness hadn't fully lifted. The mist that had filled the room was dissipating, but the atmosphere still felt thick, suffocating. I walked toward the center of the room, feeling the weight of every step. I could see the remnants of the altar, its stone surface cracked, the strange symbols now faded and almost unrecognizable. But something about it still drew me in. I reached out, hesitated, then placed my hand on the stone. Nothing happened at first, but then, a pulse of energy surged through me, like an electric shock that traveled from my fingertips into my very core. I jerked my hand back, but the sensation didn't fade. It lingered, a faint, throbbing hum that seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. I looked around the room. The shadows were shifting again, slowly, as if something was trying to move within them. My heart skipped a beat, and I gripped the knife tighter. The house wasn't done with me yet. It wasn't going to let me leave without uncovering whatever secret it had been hiding. "You won't stop me," I muttered under my breath, more to myself than to anyone else. But there was something in the air that told me I was wrong. Something else was coming. And this time, I didn't know if I was ready for it. The walls began to tremble once more, the floor vibrating beneath my feet. It was the same feeling as before, but stronger, darker. The house was reacting to something. But to what? I turned back to the altar, but there was nothing there, just the cracked stone and the remnants of the dark energy that had once filled the room. And then, from the shadows, I saw it, another figure, this one different from the one I had fought earlier. It was smaller, but it was cloaked in the same darkness, its form barely visible against the blackness of the room. It moved toward me slowly, and I could feel the air grow colder, the temperature dropping so fast I could see my breath again. The figure came closer, but this time, there was no hesitation. This time, I wasn't paralyzed with fear. I knew what I had to do. I gripped the knife and took a step forward, my body tense. The figure stopped, just out of reach, its outline flickering in and out of focus. It didn't speak at first, but I could feel its eyes on me. Its presence was overwhelming. I didn't know what it wanted, but I was done playing its game. "What are you?" I demanded, my voice steady, but there was a crack in it that I couldn't hide. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised a hand, and I saw the faintest glow from its fingertips. The glow flickered, like a dying light, but it was enough to make my heart race. "You should have never come here," it whispered, its voice soft but laced with a chilling finality. "Now you will never leave." The figure raised its hand higher, and suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way again, the floor cracking open like a giant mouth, ready to swallow me whole. I jumped back, barely avoiding the jagged edges as the hole grew wider. My eyes went wide as I looked down into the abyss below. I could feel it calling me, pulling me closer, but I wasn't going to fall into whatever darkness waited for me down there. I wasn't going to be trapped again. "No," I said, my voice firm, cutting through the whispers. I had no choice now. There was no more running. The figure reached toward me with its dark hand, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. I could see it coming, but this time, I wasn't afraid. With a swift motion, I lunged forward, driving the knife into the figure's chest. It screeched, its body flickering, and then, with one final cry, it vanished, the shadows dispersing into the air. The floor trembled again, and the room went completely still. Silence settled in, thick and oppressive, like a blanket over everything. I stood there, panting, the adrenaline still rushing through my veins, my body trembling from the sheer intensity of what had just happened. But I knew, this wasn't over. Not yet. I wasn't leaving until I had destroyed whatever was left of this place. The house had been waiting for me, but I was done waiting for it to reveal its secrets. I would finish this, one way or another. The house might have thought it had won, but I was ready to take it down. For good. I stood in the silence of the room, the weight of everything I had just experienced sinking in. The house, once alive with dark energy, now seemed still, its pulse fading into the background like the last whispers of a storm. It was over. The figure was gone, the shadows had dissipated, and the oppressive atmosphere that had gripped the house was lifting. For the first time since I set foot in this cursed place, I could breathe again. But I knew this was not the end. I could feel the residual energy of the house, the lingering remnants of the evil that had once held it in its grip. It wasn't just the house that had been alive, it was the curse itself. And that curse had been released. I turned to look at Scout, who was still by my side, his body tense but his eyes calm. He had been with me through everything, and now, more than ever, I needed him. We had faced the darkness together, and somehow, we had made it through. But there was still one more thing to do. I couldn't leave until I knew the house was truly destroyed, that whatever had been lurking here was gone for good. The air was still, the temperature normal again, but the floor beneath my feet felt different now. The heavy weight that had once pressed down on me was gone, but in its place was something lighter, something that felt like a memory, like a long-forgotten presence that had finally been allowed to rest. I knew I had to destroy whatever remained, whatever dark force still lingered in the house. The altar, the pedestal, the markings, they had all been part of something much larger, something that had been waiting for the right moment to break free. I couldn't let that happen. I moved toward the center of the room, my feet steady, my hand still gripping the knife that had been my only defense. It felt like a lifetime ago when I first stepped into this place, unsure of what I was walking into. And now, as I stood in the quiet aftermath, I knew the truth. The house wasn't just haunted. It was a vessel, a prison, a place where dark forces had been trapped, waiting for someone to come along and break the seal. I wasn't sure how it all worked, but I knew what I had to do. I had to finish it. The house wouldn't stop until everything was consumed, until everything in its path was destroyed. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I reached for the pedestal, my fingers brushing against the cold stone. The symbols were still there, faint but still visible, etched into the surface. They had been part of the ritual that had bound the evil in this place, and now it was up to me to end it. I could feel the power in the air again, a gentle hum that seemed to come from deep within the house. The energy was still there, but it was different now, fading, weakening. I placed the knife on the stone, steadying my breath, my mind focused. The house trembled, but it wasn't the same as before. It was like the house was surrendering, its grip loosening, its hold fading. I closed my eyes and spoke the words I knew I had to say. I didn't understand the language, but I didn't need to. I had felt it in my soul. The words came from somewhere deep within, rising up like a call, a command that could break the house's hold on the world. As I spoke, the walls shuddered. The mist that had once filled the room began to swirl around me, but now it wasn't threatening. It was almost peaceful, like it was being released from its prison. I felt the presence of the house, not as a malevolent force, but as a trapped soul, now free to move on. The light in the room shifted, the shadows disappearing, replaced by a warm, golden glow that filled the space. I opened my eyes and saw that the house was changing. The walls, once dark and twisted, were now glowing softly, the stone warm beneath my hand. The air had shifted, no longer heavy with darkness, but light with something else, something pure. Scout stood beside me, his body relaxed, his tail gently wagging as if sensing the change. I looked around the room one last time, taking in the quiet peace that had replaced the chaos. The house was no longer alive with evil, no longer a prison for the dark forces that had once ruled it. It was just a house now, empty and waiting. And as I stood there, I knew that the house had finally been set free, and so had I. The door that had once been locked was now wide open, the path forward clear. I had done it. I had freed the house, and in doing so, freed myself from the weight of its curse. There was nothing left to hold me here. No more shadows, no more whispers, no more creatures from the dark. I had come here to find answers, and now I had them. The fight was over. The house had given up its secrets, and I had destroyed the darkness. I took a deep breath, turned to Scout, and with one last glance at the cabin, I walked out into the daylight. The fog that had once surrounded the house had lifted, and the air was fresh and clean. It was the beginning of something new. The darkness had been defeated, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. In this gripping tale of bravery and mystery, a veteran faces not only the physical challenges of his past, but also the supernatural forces that haunt a long-abandoned house. As the story unfolds, this veteran and his loyal dog find themselves trapped in a house full of secrets, where every corner holds a dark memory and the whispers of something ancient and malevolent. What starts as a simple quest for refuge soon turns into a battle for survival against a force more powerful than anything the veteran has faced before. This chilling journey through the haunted house is more than just a survival story. It's a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. As the veteran delves deeper into the house's sinister history, he must confront not only the supernatural threats that lurk in the shadows, but also his own fears and doubts. The story explores themes of courage, redemption, and the personal demons that even the bravest must face. As the veteran uncovers the house's twisted past, he is forced to make a choice: stay and fight the darkness or escape before it's too late. This is one of the most compelling veteran stories you will hear, as it combines thrilling suspense with emotional depth, all while showcasing the strength of a man who refuses to give up. With every twist and turn, the veteran's journey brings him closer to the truth and forces him to confront his deepest fears. In the end, the house may have been a prison for more than just the darkness. It was also a place where the veteran could finally face his own personal battles and find peace. If you enjoy veteran stories with a touch of the supernatural, this tale will keep you on the edge of your seat. Join the veteran and his dog as they unravel the mysteries of the haunted house, proving that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not in the outside world, but within the heart and mind. This powerful story will leave you reflecting on what it truly means to fight for survival, redemption, and peace in the face of overwhelming odds.